Hello, I wanted to put together a real quick video talking about Earwig and the Witch, which is a recent release from Studio Ghibli. It was distributed here in the US by G Kids, and it is currently streaming through HBO Max. For one thing, most people have already talked about this movie in terms of like the online critic community, and I was hesitant to do anything with it just because a lot of what I'm going to say has already been said, and I typically only like to talk about something if I feel like I can add something unique to the conversation. But just for good measure, I thought I may as well put my thoughts out there and confirm, I guess, what a lot of other people have said about this movie, as well as providing what I think is some crucial context for viewing and critiquing the movie at all. So to start out with that context, this is obviously it's a CG movie. That's not what Ghibli tends to do. They're famous for their 2D animation, and they are still doing that. This isn't a big shift. The next Hayao Miyazaki movie is on its way, and that will be 2D. This one is directed by Goro Miyazaki, Hayao Miyazaki's son. It's not his first feature, although there is a very famous clip of Hayao Miyazaki seeing Goro's first movie at the big premiere and saying how much he hated it and he just didn't want to be there. So I thought it was a bit strange that he would then allow his son to direct this movie under the Ghibli name, and in fact, as I'll get to in a little bit, I think that the biggest mistake here with the movie is branding it as a Studio Ghibli project at all. This was originally produced for Japanese TV, so that's some really important context right there. It has nowhere near the budget of even a regular 2D Studio Ghibli movie, which apparently isn't that much, like 30 million maybe, I think I've heard, for a lot of their stuff. And it's absolutely nowhere near the budget of basically any American big studio CG movie. Illumination Entertainment, which famously makes their stuff as cheaply as possible, tends to be like 50 to 80 million dollars for a feature. So we don't know the budget for Earwig, but we can assume that it is very, very low, just a fraction of what even the cheap US CG movies tend to get. That's very important to keep in mind because yes, it's ugly. This is an ugly movie. The character models look bad and stiff. The backgrounds are some of the nicest parts most of the time, and as another review mentioned, that's probably because a lot of those backgrounds were hand drawn by Studio Ghibli staff, some of the older guys, and were then translated to CG with computers and technology. The movement is awful. It never feels lively or interesting. It's not fun to look at. Similarly, the music in this movie just stinks. It really does. The main song that they use several different times in a few different forms, the one full-on version where it's the whole band and they're just giving you the whole song, that's actually kind of fun. It's a fun little rock song. It's okay, but outside of that, the more incidental score music is just trash, and that sounds mean. I really didn't like it, and it actually did feel very amateurish. I don't know if that was related to the relatively low budget or not, but it does not work. And as other people have said, that's kind of a big problem when you want to make your movie so much about music, at least like thematically. Or as I already mentioned, I think the biggest mistake here on the meta level was saying, hey, this is from Studio Ghibli. You all love their stuff. Bad move. Very bad move. And I get that, like, it was, a lot of the people who animated it were some of the younger staff members at Studio Ghibli, but you could have very easily just whipped up a kind of dumb on-the-spot studio name and said, oh, it's this other studio, even if it actually is Ghibli people. I think it would still be okay to say, hey, this is a side thing. This is not very much like what you've come to expect from the studio. Don't have those expectations, because that's the biggest thing the movie's fighting against, is those massive expectations of quality and emotional impact and great music, by the way, of all the Studio Ghibli stuff. Even their lesser efforts have some real quality to them. This does not. So that branding was a huge goof on the business side of things. Aside from that, I do want to very briefly get into like some genuine media criticism of the movie, just for good measure, because it also is just a bad movie on the technical side, so we may as well talk about that. But overall, the characters and the story are just busted. They're just bad. Our main character, Earwig, or Erica Wig is the fake name they give her at the orphanage, is just really unlikable. I get that it's based on a children's book or a children's book series. You can tell very easily that they were trying to do like a similar vibe to young female protagonists of other children's books. Like, she's really not that far off from someone like Eloise or Madeline, or even like, is it Judy Moody? I always hated those books, but little girl protagonists of children's books of the past. Like, it kind of has that feel like, oh, she's spunky and kind of wacky and kind of mean, but in a kid way where it's not really bad or threatening. Or we can just compare this type of character to any number of the young female protagonists that have been in Ghibli movies, from Spirited Away and Totoro and many others. And here, the character just does not work on a very fundamental level. And maybe part of that is because everything's really on the nose in terms of the writing with this character. I think there are a few different moments where she just describes her situation in really blunt detail. Like, you know what? I think this might be the very first time that I've had to sleep on my own. Or like, oh, suddenly I'm in a situation where I can't control everyone around me.
For the first time in my life, I'm being made to do something I don't want to do.
But the fact that she says so many different times, oh, my whole thing is that I control other people and make them do what I want, it's not a likable trait, especially if we see it having negative effects on other people around her. Like, that's very strange. It also muddled her relationship with the orphanage, the woman in charge of the children's home place, because she's like, oh yeah, I know how to make her do what I want. But the way she does that is just to be really nice to the lady. And I was like, that's not, I mean, if her motivations are bad, then it's manipulative, but that's also just being a nice person. That's a perk of being a good person, is that other people don't hate you and they might like give you special treatment because you're nice to them. It all seemed very strange and confused and muddled, and none of it made me like this character at all. Her best friend Chowder, I think, is one of the ugliest character models I've seen in recent memory in any CG film. Some other really basic stuff. The most glaring issue with the movie on the technical level is the story and the story structure. So for one, if your characters aren't that likable or interesting, you're already fighting an uphill battle with keeping viewers engaged and invested in the story. But the structure of the story is so bad and extremely lopsided that it honestly shocked me when the credits came up. Like, I was blown away that the end of the movie was actually the end of the movie. I couldn't understand it, because at best, all of the story stuff we're given here is the first act of a movie, and then maybe the last minute is like, would maybe be the last minute of a real movie with 3 whole acts. But this really, I can't stress enough how much it feels like it's just getting started by the time it's over. That's exactly what it feels like. It just slams you with a bunch of progression at the tail end, instead of showing the progression over the course of 3 acts. It's setting everything up, and you're thinking, okay, she's in a house where she doesn't want to be, and they're like magical people. Oh, this could be kind of neat, because she's going to see their different magical powers. She will develop her own magical powers and stuff. She'll become a witch. It seems like what the title was trying to imply. It never does. It's just all those surrounding characters are even more one note and thin than our main character, Earwig. Like, they're just really thin villains. They're not super sympathetic, even when you get some background information about them. I still don't really understand why Earwig's mom abandoned her, or what she was talking about with the witches. Like, none of that got explained. I don't know if they thought they were leading into a sequel or something. There's just so much about the story that gives you nothing. It gives you so little to go on and so little to keep your interest that it's shocking to me that they looked at the script and said, oh yeah, let's go to all the incredible effort of actually animating all this stuff. It's kind of stunning to me. And as a result, we're stuck in this really dingy, ugly environment, which is this witch house, for basically the entire runtime. Even at the point where she is able to control the people around her and the people in the house and do whatever she wants, we never actually get to see her leave that environment. So I was kind of wondering, like, could they not afford to make some new environments or something? Was it too time consuming to make? Because all I wanted was just for the movie to let me out of that setting, or for it to brighten, because that would be a really good opportunity, right? This could be like a restoration kind of narrative where, oh, she steps into this sad house where it's really dingy and it reflects the personalities of the people living there and their sad emotional states. She could be the one who comes in and transforms it with her girlish charm, and, you know, she's going to brighten their days. And as a reflection of that, the house itself will transform and improve and be a nicer place to be in. It's been done a million times, and for some reason, just didn't do it here. We see her room change at the very end. We get one shot of her nice new room where it just makes her look spoiled. And then that's it. That's it. We never really get to leave that setting ever again. We don't get to see what other characters are up to in the meantime. Yeah, as a result, the story feels claustrophobic and just plain unfinished, and it's definitely the most frustrating part of the viewing experience for me. As a way to end, I think I'll just say that I'll take a guess at why I think they went ahead with this objectively bad story structure. Because here's the thing. If we get real and we look at all those very famous and beloved Studio Ghibli movies of the past, the story structure has always been pretty bad. And by that I mean non-traditional, which means not usually well-paced or not usually split up into 3 very clean acts. You can still shove it into that structure if you push and pull really hard, but for the most part, they're not following the standards of what's considered quote-unquote good screenwriting. However, that's fine if the movie has other stuff to keep the audience interested, engaged, and entertained. And that's why all those movies have been so successful, is because they have loads of other stuff that's just so great about them. The music is fantastic and enchanting, and the characters tend to be at least likable, if not all that distinct from one another. The wacky supernatural elements that come into play are very interesting and cool to look at because they have wonderful visual designs. You don't need big, complicated reasons for why things are happening because you're interested to see what happens next, regardless of those reasons. So with that in mind, I'm not exactly shocked that what is technically a Studio Ghibli movie would flounder in that way, where they didn't look that closely at the story and they said, oh, well, it'll be charming in other ways. People like the character maybe, or they'll think it's a cool setting, there's magic happening. That'll be enough to keep the engine going, and it's absolutely not here. Maybe they just didn't happen to realize that the characters were also poorly written and that the environment was not fun to be in and that it doesn't progress in any meaningful way. So I have a feeling that somehow influenced the oversight of all those really core elements, especially the story structure. And I guess I just need to stop talking about it now, but you don't need to watch it to get any of this. You don't need to watch it even to really talk about it. If you watch the trailer, you basically get a sense of everything that's there and how ugly it is. And that's all, that's all I can say. I'm sure many people have iterated these exact points before, but I thought may as well make my feelings known and put this together very quickly just to share that. But that's about it. Feel free to tell me how you felt about it if you saw it at all, and that's all. Goodbye.